Hi, I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about a challenge that I set for myself at the beginning of the year. It's one I've been calling Nikki's Year of Awesome Books. And it's not really a challenge as much as it is at the beginning of each year, I take a look at my TBR with the clean slate that is Goodreads. I take a look at my TBR and I identify the books that I am most excited to read for the year. And I compile them on a list, and then when I'm feeling a little directionless, I'll refer to it and maybe try to prioritize those higher than other books. The whole mantra is read the best books first, and I haven't been historically good at that. In fact, I set this challenge up for several years now, and every year aside from this one, I usually only read like one or two from that entire list per year. So I'm really good at setting priorities, but I haven't been good at following through with them. For various reasons, review obligations, library copies becoming available, just being susceptible to that, ooh, shiny syndrome, I must read that book now. But over the last year and a half, I've been working really hard to really focus on high priority titles, so I've not been making myself pick up next books in a series of ones that I'm not enjoying as much as the other ones that I was enjoying more. It has come to a point in the year where I know I'm not going to be able to pick up any more titles from this list, and so I can give you a summary of how I did on it. Now, incidentally, there are 22 titles on this lineup. I did not do that on purpose, but I think when I do one for next year, I'm going to pick 23 titles, 23 amazing books to read in 2023. And these are essentially my 5-star predictions. Books that I was so interested in that I thought, I better prioritize that because I bet I'm going to love it. So let's go through and see how they actually held up. Of the 22 titles, I have read 17 of them, which is pretty dang good for me. So I've got the list pulled up here, and I'm just going to go through the lineup. At the top, City of Golden Shadow by Tad Williams, book 1 in the Otherland series. This one did not get read this year. I had just finished Dragonbone Chair, and a couple of really trusted friends and fellow reviewers said, if you'd like to try more things from this author, give this one a chance. It's a sci-fi and it's really cool. Slowly over the course of the year, I realized I wasn't really ready to commit to more from that author until I went back and finished the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, of which I have yet to even continue that. So that one's on the back burner, and I will probably not be including it in next year's lineup. Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett. I had just finished the first book in the series and was completely blown away by it. 5-star read. It was perfect for what I was in the mood for at the time, and I loved every minute. I thought it was so much fun. Hated this book. Hated it. Had to force myself to finish it. If I have to listen to one more scene of evil monologuing where nothing's happening, I just... So much for 5-star predictions. Like, I hated it. To the point where I have the first 2 in hardcover, and I read the third one. It was better than the second one, about a 3-star read overall. And I'm not sure if I want to buy it for the collection, because whenever I look at this book, I get angry. But they're very pretty, so especially the third one. So yeah, that was a bust. But for the record, I seem to be in the minority on that one. Most people really like the second book. More than the first even, which I just can't even fathom. Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. Loved it. Loved it. 4.5 out of 5 stars. I knew I would, though. But what's cool about this one is he's so immersive into characterization in his series. And at the end of this one, you really got a sense of the scope of his world and the kind of future arcs that he's working towards. And I really enjoyed this book. There were a few key scenes in here that were my favorites of the entire trilogy, and yeah, I thought it was very well done. Finishing this was bittersweet, though, because it brought me up to date with all of the adult works that Abercrombie has out on the market, and I might be including the first book in his young adult series in my lineup for 2023, but we'll see if it makes the cut or not. But yeah, loved it, gushed about it. In the Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I had picked up Malice and then had to put Malice down to read this one because it was due for 2 different book clubs, both of which that had picked this book at the same time. So yeah, it's a good thing it expedited it, though, because I may not have picked it up until I was done with Faithful and the Fallen, but I'm glad I did. I really loved this book. Very slow pacing. If you hear of people who had trouble with it, that's probably why, because it takes about halfway into the book before you really feel that spark. But for me, it's all about the characters, and I was connected to the characters from the start, and really liked the immersive quality of the story. And there's so much cool stuff going on in here, but it's all on the periphery. So you know that there's a bunch of depth to this world that you haven't really gotten to explore yet because of like hints on the sidelines. And so that's what makes me really excited to read the second book. I have yet to. So, and that one's definitely making the list for next year. I don't remember exactly what I rated this, but 4-star plus, like really good. The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. It just sounded like a lot of fun, and I believe at the time I had gotten an e-arc of it, so I read that one in a couple days. So much fun. As much as I love dragons, I'll admit I had no idea what specifically a kaiju was. It's basically a Godzilla, a sanctuary for Godzillas. And it was told with all the fun and flair that you come to expect from a John Scalzi book, and so I enjoyed that one thoroughly. Like, not the most sophisticated thing I've read, but one of the most delightful things I've read this year. 4-star. I had The Bone Shard Daughter on my list, and my enthusiasm to start this series has kind of waned throughout the year. I think what prompted me to put it on the list was I saw the cover for the second one. It's that beautiful teal, and it made me want to read the first one. But I have not even purchased a copy of the first one yet, and so I don't think I'm going to be including it on the list for next year. It is one that I'd like to read eventually, but I'm not feeling all fired up about it anymore. Which happens, you know, you set a priority list at the beginning of the year and your reading tastes change. What sparked your interest at the time might be like second fiddle to what's sparking your interest now. So yeah, I'm gonna let that one go for a bit. The Trouble with the Cursed by Kim Harrison. One of the books I was most anticipating coming out this year, and read it as an e-arc and just enjoyed the heck out of it. This is one of those series that feels like coming home whenever I get to pick up a new book, and I'm really liking the trajectory. I'm liking the focus on the demons. Those were my favorite aspects of the initial 13 books, and I found this one highly satisfying. 4 stars. Jade City by Fonda Lee, added to the list for obvious reasons. It's everywhere. And I just finished this one last week, so it just barely made its way into the completed category. I'm really grateful that it was picked for my Patreon book club, or else I wouldn't have picked it up until next year. And it was a decent read. I enjoyed it. Maybe not as much as some. I've read a couple of other books, believe it or not, that I liked a little bit better that were in the same vein. But I know that a lot of the excitement for the series is how it builds momentum and where it goes. And the X factor for me in a bunch of my all-time favorite series is that momentum that they're able to build throughout several books. It makes it bigger than the sum of its parts in a way. I am glad I read it, and I imagine the second book in the series will be pretty high on my priority list for next year as well. She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This one made the lineup because it was a release from the previous year that I didn't have a chance to get around to. And I think a lot of the books that I put on next year's will be in that same vein, like books that came out this year that I didn't make time for. This one was a very mixed bag for me. The first part of the story is separated into 3 parts. The first part was a solid 5-star. Loved it. Thought it was the most poignant, beautiful thing that I read this year. And then the story kind of nosedived from there. It's almost like either the author wrote the rest of it first and then wrote the introduction when she was more skilled and brought some life to it that she hadn't brought in previous things. Or the first part was like a short story that was workshopped to death and brought to perfection, and the rest wasn't paid the same care. I don't know, I can't tell, because it is so weird to me to have a book with 2 completely varying degrees of quality. Like, the back half was 1 or 2 stars for me. I had a hard time finishing this book, and it started out with such a bang. I think I split the difference at like a 2.5 out of 5 star. It's a bummer that I didn't like this one as much as I thought I would, and in fact, I might donate or sell this one at some point, and I don't think I'm continuing on in the duology. I think it's duology. We shall see. I had both Kraken's Tooth and City of Songs by Anthony Ryan, books 2 and 3 in the Seven Swords series on the list. I read the first one, and then for whatever reason stalled on picking up the next two. And in fact, had I not done a short story focus about a month or two ago, these may not have gotten read at all. They're so short. So I keep saying, oh, I could put them in my schedule at any time. I really don't have to plan for them. Yeah, if it's not written, it's not real. So I have to actually make time and schedule things for these. But yes, I'm glad I read these. The first book, probably the strongest so far. And it was such small, compact storytelling. Things have to move along at a quicker pace than I'm used to. So things seem a little more convenient than I'd like. But, I mean, given the scope of the story and how much world building and characterization he's able to pack into these tiny books, like, I'll give it a pass. I really enjoyed these. I'm glad I finally read them. I should have a copy of the fourth book, but apparently the publisher is struggling a bit, and so I have yet to see it, even though I ordered it forever ago. I think it's only been out about a month, and I think it's shipping from the UK, so, you know, we'll give it some things. But I haven't even seen, like, a shipping update. Anyway, I'm planning to read the fourth one. I was gonna do a review for these initial three, but I'm like, well, if I just wait a little bit longer, then I can do a 4-book series review, which would satisfy my completionism, but yeah, may not happen at all if I have to wait much longer. But yes, like these. Soul Taken, book 13 in the Mercy Thompson series. This book is perfect for fall vibes. Had a lot of fun with it. It started out a little slower than I remember most of her books starting out, but it built somewhere. I thought the mystery was more satisfying than I've seen in a while, and I really liked the character dynamics, and there was a lot of like very subtle pack dynamics and revelations within that I quite enjoyed. So another good installment in the series, like probably a 4 out of 5 stars. Really glad that I prioritized this one this year. In the Shadow of Lightning by Brian McClellan, first book in his new series, Glass Immortals. And Powder Mage is one of my all-time favorite series. Absolutely love all 6 books. Really excited that I read those, and I thought I will read anything this author decides to produce next. I clamored for this one, got it as an ARC, and yeah, quite enjoyed it. The things that I love about this author from that other series do not make a strong appearance in this book. If I had read this one first, I would not be a believer. But that being said, there are enough things about it that I really liked that I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 star. And especially near the end, I'm not sure if he won me over or just kept me intrigued, but he's definitely going somewhere broader with this story than was evident in this first book. And so I'm on board to see what happens next. The only objection I have is he has a mystery in this book that is like sadly simple. It is not a satisfying mystery at all for me, and yeah, kind of clumsily done. So that knocked it down a little bit in my regard overall. Still glad I read this one. We Ride the Storm by Devin Madsen, first book in a series, Reborn Empire. And this one I did not get a chance to get around to. I've nominated it for book club a couple of times. I might continue nominating it until it wins. It's one that I've been super interested in, but just haven't made time for, so I bet this will make the list for next year. Guns of Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. A really good reading friend who knows my tastes well personally recommended this one to me a couple of years ago, and I've just been dragging my feet on getting to it. But wouldn't you know it, this year I picked up my first Tchaikovsky, Children of Time, and it ended up being my very favorite read of the year so far. So I have this high priority Tchaikovsky on my list. Instead of reading that one, I read another one, and it ended up being a huge favorite, so what am I waiting for? I have no idea. But I know I'm not going to get to it before the end of the year, so that one will be on the list for next year. And I'll probably read it simply because I'm so sick of seeing it on my high priority lists, but never actually getting to it. The Collapsing Empire by Scalzi. Pretty sure when I was making the list, I was in a really Scalzi mood, that type of cheeky humor, fun plots type of thing. And a lot of people, after I've discussed other books like this on my channel, a lot of people said, you know, this one was my favorite work from him. So I bumped it up in priority, and I actually read the entire trilogy this year. It was one of my book club selections, and I'm like middle level on this series. It's not my favorite. Definitely preferred His Old Man's War. I'd say the whole thing is about a 3-star for me. Like the first book, 3-star read, really enjoyed it, good introduction to the world, took a little bit to get going, found one of the characters obnoxious, but she ended up growing on me as the series went along. The second book, awesome. 4 or 5 stars. Like, one of my favorite reads of the year. It had such a great momentum, great exploration, great combination of all the things I look for in books, like characterization, plot, pacing, everything. The third book was a freaking waste of pages. It was like recap, reiteration, and then the last 10% of the book, some cool stuff happened. I think this would have been much better as a duology, but it effectively knocked my enthusiasm for the series down quite a bit. So after that second book, I'm like, wow. After the third book, I'm like, 3 stars. We're good. Malice by John Gwynne, first book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, one I'd been meaning to get to for ages, but just never seemed to make time for. I'm really glad I did. I enjoyed this book. If you like classic fantasy, but like me, don't have the patience to sit through a classic fantasy because it just drags on forever, this is a great pick. It's like the best of both worlds with modern writing and skills and storytelling, wonderful voice, and that classic fantasy feel that really makes you get behind the characters and feel so inspired about what they're doing. So cool. So I read this one and the second one, and I have on the docket the third one by the end of the year. If I don't make time for all of the things, then they will make an appearance on next year's list, I'm sure. But yeah, love that one. Shadows Past, book 3 in the Borderlands series by Lorna Freeman. I've been talking about the series for a couple of years, but I just never made time to read the third book. It's the final book in the Borderlands series, but I use the term loosely because it's more like she just stopped writing. And this one, okay, so it's not really a series where you feel a good progression of story. It's more like the first book was amazing, and then it turned kind of episodic. And so this one had its own contained plot, not relevant to the first book at all, really, other than you just have the same amazing characters and cool world building. And it was just okay. You know, I enjoyed it. I think I like it more than most fantasy books written in this same time frame, but it didn't leave me singing praises for the series as a whole. So I would say read the first book because it's a hidden gem and it's so cool, and then feel satisfied with your life that you read that one. And if you want to spend more time with these cool characters, then you can continue on like I did. And I don't regret reading it. And at least I was warned going in that it was more of a tangent story than any kind of fulfilling continuation. But, you know, we all complain that series go on too long in fantasy, and I think the first book stands solidly on its own, that you really could just do a one and done. There you go. House of Chains by Steven Erikson, book 4 in the Malazan series, book whatever in the ultimate reading order that I'm doing. Can't quite remember. I am currently reading this one. It will probably take me until the end of 2022 to finish it, but at least I'm continuing on in a reasonable time frame for a Malazan book. I think I finished the third one in January. And the first fourth of it was blissful, and we were only following like 5 characters. I felt like I could just relax into the story. I didn't have to concentrate too hard. And then the second part hit, and there are so many people to keep track of again. It's a good thing I did a lot of solidifying who everybody was when I was reading the first 3 books, because I think I'd be totally lost right now. Because, you know, the characters are meaningless unless you remember what they had done before. They'd be just talking heads otherwise, but at least I'm able to remember most of them, and so their scenes have a little more significance. But still, I'm racking my brain a little bit. I will probably have this one done by the end of the year, but I'm not making any promises. It took me a whole year to read Gardens of the Moon. Inda by Sherwood Smith. Upon looking at my shelves, this one always stands out as a series that I really, really want to get to. But I'm in the middle of Malazan. I'm in the middle of Faithful and the Fallen. A couple of series were chonkers that require a lot of concentration, and you got to keep track of a lot of characters, and I'm told this one is kind of similar in that regard. And so even though it's really high priority, I'm sick of seeing it on my lists because I never get around to it. I know it's going to require a level of mental energy that I just don't have to give right now because it's being used on other series. So I'm not sure if I'm going to include it on next year's list or not, but I am sure that it is still one that I'd like to read. I just am being realistic. I'm not going to finish Malazan next year. So maybe I'll put this one off the list for a year or so and see where I'm at by then. Transformation by Carol Berg, first book in the Rai Kara series. I put this one on the list because I had just showcased it in my Sunday Shelfie series, and a couple people like trusted people really liked it and spoke up like, hey, bump that up in priority a little bit. I think you'll like it. And I did like it okay. I had some objections about some things about it. And actually, it's a miracle it got read when it did because I have so many things vying for my attention. But I got smart near the end of the year and started including books from this list on my Patreon book club picks. Because obviously they're high priority, so, you know, may as well put those up as candidates. It seems like a smart thing to do. And it actually won. So I read it and I liked it okay, probably like 2.5 out of 5 stars. But I'm not sure if I'm going to continue the series or not. So this is one where I thought I would like more than I did, and yeah, fell a little short of that 5-star prediction list. And last but not least, the Amulet of Samarkand, book 1 of the Bartimaeus series by Jonathan Stroud. Yet another one that won for Patreon Book Club, and I'm so glad it did. Not only did I devour this first book, but I went on to read the entire series in about a month. It is the most delightful thing I've read in ages. Brought back all those nostalgic feelings of when I was a kid, but at the same time was written in a sophisticated enough manner to be accessible as an adult. Because I don't have a lot of patience for stuff that's a little bit below my level. And we're talking middle grade here, like I'm not that high up. But honestly, this one had so much rich content. The footnotes are amazing. They add such depth to the character and the story. Can't recommend this one enough. I did a full video review for it. And I do not believe, had I not added it to my 2022 Year of Awesome Reading list, that it would have gotten read. So, yeah, very grateful. With the exception of 1 or 2 duds, most of those were really worth my time, and like 5 of them were huge standouts of the year so far. So, I'm definitely continuing on with the trend. I'm not treating it as a challenge like you must read everything on this list, but it is so nice when I'm feeling directionless to have somewhere to refer to help get me back on track. Like, you don't know what to read next? Maybe try this. The fun part will be the next video I do for this, where I get to kind of look through my massive TBR and see what books kind of have floated to the top of my priority list for next year. So stay tuned for that. It'll probably come out near the end of the year as I'm transitioning into 2023. And by the way, I'm filming this one so much earlier because I have a realistic grasp on what I'm going to be able to read throughout the end of the year. And I know none of the books on that list are high priority enough to bump anything else out of the way, so I just know I'm not going to get to them, so it seemed like a good time. I want to know, do you go into the new year with any kind of list of priorities? And if so, how have you been doing this year? You've been reading through them? Last year I read only 2 books off of an entire shelf, and it was so sad. This year is much better. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.